It's been said that if there is such a thing as a perfect crime, it's perfect only because it's never discovered. This is almost what happens in Unholy Matrimony. Patrick Duffy, you're on the scene of a crime that almost is not regarded as a crime.
Well, as a matter of fact, the character that I play was brought into the crime almost when it was finalized as being accidental death by hit and run. And the character that I play, the detective, just happened to be the one that these parents of this girl kept badgering to reopen this case because they refused to believe that it was an accident. They were right up to receiving the insurance policy money, etc. So it was almost a perfect crime.
You suppose, before we go any further, that it makes us wonder how many fatalities out there on the roads, for example, might just be...
You'll make yourself nuts if you think like that. You know, I think about everything I read in the newspaper, not just hit and runs, but everything that anybody says has an possible opposing viewpoint. So yeah.
You talked about making yourself nuts. A show like this has so many obsessions intersecting. The people out to get you to get into the investigation, and then tell us what happens to you as you get in on the track of this.
Well, I mean, in terms of the character, what we had to develop, because this Dillman as a real person was an excellent detective. In terms of making the character interesting for me to play, we had to build up a frustration level leading up to his involvement in this crime, and that's the part that, in one sense, we fictionalized a little bit. We gave him a prehistory before he gets involved in this crime, and it is the frustration that a lot of law officers come up against at some point in their career, which is how many people you turn back out on the street that you know, in fact, are guilty, but because of the structure of the law and the system of jurisprudence, they go free. So he was getting, at that point in his career, very frustrated at the amount of garbage going back on the street when this woman kept talking to him about this girl. And he finally decided to accept it. And then as he started to see that there was indeed a crime, the obsession to not let this be yet another one of those statistical releases.
And I guess you need that energy and zeal to do the case in the first place, but it's like riding a tiger, isn't it?
Well, the interesting thing is that, you know, if it were all car chases and chasing them through the alleys and beating them up, that's one thing. You have to have an incredible amount, as a police officer, an incredible amount of energy and determination to do it all within the system, which is just legwork, which is just papers upon papers and testimony and all that kind of stuff. And that's what attracted me to the part, that it was not, you know, a Starsky and Hutch police story. It was really just this dogged pursuit of this one guy.
And as far as what it allows you as an actor to do, what in a movie like this is maybe a good step for you as an extension away from, say, Dallas?
Well, we do 8x10 glossies on Dallas, and we've never, you know, we've never pretended to do other than that. You know, the storylines are okay, and we enjoy doing them, but there's a formula to it. The type of thing that we did on Unholy Matrimony is strictly a one-shot thing. It was like somebody said after the screening, you know, you ought to do a series about this character. And I couldn't think of anything more exhausting than to play this guy week after week. My God, you know, a movie is one thing.
Or else you'd get obsessed with it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I have no desire to beat myself up like that on a weekly basis.
You're the only actor I've ever heard of who was an actor in residence for a whole state.
Yes.
What?
It takes a lot of panache to do that. You know, I wrote that contract because I couldn't get a job anywhere else.
This is in the state of Washington now.
State of Washington. I wrote a contract for any cultural group coming into the state using state funds, and almost every state has that. It's called a cultural enrichment program or a Title III program or something. So symphonies, ballet companies come in and tour the schools, and I figured, well, the state should support their own actors in that. So I wrote a contract saying that they had to use me in each of these categories, and they did.
You created this position in a sense?
Yeah, and so for a year and a half, and it was culturally enriching for me. I did mime with symphony orchestras. I met my wife in the ballet company that toured the state.
This should be a model for a countrywide policy. You know?
I think it could produce a greater awareness of the reserve of talent that each individual state has, and I think the whole theater industry and the cultural industry in every particular state would really grow by virtue of that.
It's been a pleasure meeting you. Patrick Duffy, and it was almost a perfect crime. Pat and I are both in Redondo Beach, California. I'm John Tibbetts for KCTV5.